And I will say, Mayor, that Doug Jones's wife, Shelley, took your muffins, and she went throughout all of the finders keepers, the whole lot, and sold every single one of them.
All fun today.
Well, I hope you paid for it, Doug. So I have to defer to council. I have the checks.
Mr. Host, before we go to council, would it, based on the information that we've received tonight, this may resolve itself very quickly in a couple of weeks. At the worst case, it looks like this may be 90 days before it's resolved. Would the Wilson County Patriots be willing to hold that until we could make a presentation legally to the Parks Foundation?
Certainly.
Would
Like I
that,
said, it's all in check format, there is no cash. And I also want to emphasize, the cash was immediately taken back to my house. There were 4 of us that verified the cash, so it wasn't just one person counting. I want you to understand that it was done with the utmost integrity, and we accounted for all of it. An email went out immediately as to what we'd earned. And also, Finders Keepers still have several items that they've agreed to sell, and if they sell them, they will donate all of it to the Parks Foundation.
with that, Madam Mayor, I'll make a motion to table the check presentation until we resolve the status of the Parks Foundation.
Okay, I have a motion to table. May I have a second? No, it's just a presentation. It's just a presentation.
Okay.
I think that's a good, Madam Mayor, I think that's a good resolution for tonight.
The motion or?
No, just what was stated.
And anytime you need muffins, just let me know.
I will,
Right away.
and I love the way you did the recipes, perfect.
You're welcome. And I encourage council to next time bake also. Now we're going to go on to new business. 4A, consideration and action to approve a resolution appointing a nominee to the Wilson County Appraisal District Board of Directors vacancy. Andy?
There's nothing listed on there, but we just received a notice from the appraisal district asking for a nomination to this board, and we brought it to the council's attention.
Can I ask a couple questions about the vacancy, Andy?
Yes, sir.
As I understand it, this isn't a routine appointment to the appraisal district, that they had somebody resign mid-term, and that's why it's being done this way, is that correct?
Well, so we can get it straight out of the person's mouth. I think Mr. Stoll is here. He can give us an update on what why the nomination was formally sent to the city.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Stahl. I'm the Chief Appraiser of the Wilson County Appraisal District. And we did the member that represents Stockdale School in the city of Stockdale resigned. He was elected mayor in the past election and felt that he needed to resign from our board. Back in, it was 1979 or 1980, the county, the entities in the county adopted what is commonly known as the three-quarter rule. Basically, the election and nomination process for the Wilson County Board of Directors is a little bit different than what is generally done. What's done here in this county is each of the 4 cities and schools, Poe, Lavernia, Floresville, and Stockdale, they can each together nominate one member, and the county gets a member on the board. Unfortunately, the tax code doesn't address what if you adopted the three-quarter rule. So the general process is that every entity that has a vote on our board of directors gets to an opportunity to nominate a person to replace the member if there's a vacancy on the board. Generally, in the past, it's always come from the entities that the member has resigned from, but every taxing unit that has a vote on our board has an opportunity to nominate a replacement. That replacement would then be chosen by our board of directors who they want to replace.
So, okay, I understand that this is a unique situation that we're filling a vacancy. Normally, They serve for a period of, a specific term?
2 years.
2 years, and then they're reappointed by Floresville, Stockdale, Post, Laverne.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
How much, excuse me, how much time were you on needing to fill this vacancy? I believe in the email it's 45 days.
There's 45 days from notice,
Okay,
which is going to be July 15th, I believe.
July 15th, is that the deadline?
Yes.
We do have another meeting, okay.
Does anyone have someone to nominate, or do you want to?
I would like to table the item to appoint a nominee and have it in the format to how we would appoint other members to the board, to our other boards, in the form of the credentials and what, you know, into what makes them a responsible candidate for the appraisal board.
So using the same applications we have online?
So that way we can probably advertise it in the paper and maybe somebody out there will can do that. What would it come from one of us?
The nomination would have to come from one of us, and that's, again, we are nominating, and any of the entities can nominate, and it'll ultimately be the current board will decide from all of the nominees as to who they would elect.
And this would be done specifically within the city, correct? Or is this the city of Floresville, period, you know, outside of
Anybody in the county.
anybody
Yeah,
in the county?
any entity that has a vote on our board of directors can nominate.
No, but like if the city nominates, can we nominate someone that lives in the county? Or does it have to be in the city limits?
I believe you can nominate anybody that you want to.
Anybody in the taxing district, they'd have to reside in the taxing district.
I believe so.
Who is currently serving as the Floresville ISD representative on your board?
It's Scott Sisti.
Okay, I have a motion to table by Councilman Rodriguez. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilman Rodriguez, second by Councilman Miller to table. Item 4A, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. But you can wait and stay there. I'll call you right back. Okay, now we're going to go on to item 4B, consideration and action to approve the 2014 Wilson County Appraisal District budget. Mr. Stahl.
Yes, my board of directors met last night. They approved the proposed 2014 operating budget. It then became the approved operating budget. At that point, it comes out to all the, every taxing entity in the district, but the 9 voting entities are the ones that have to either approve or take no action within 30 days for the approval. Our budget did increase this year, $36,990. The majority of that is from anticipation of healthcare benefits. With the healthcare reform, we really don't know what's going to happen with that. So generally, we would budget 10 to 20% increase just to be safe. This year, we budgeted 35% because we really have no idea how that's going to affect us. That's about a $25,000 increase over what was budgeted the previous year. The rest of the increase comes from different little increases on the other line items, such as capital appraisal group, who appraises our mineral properties. Of course, with all the oil stuff going on, they have work to do, so they're going to charge us more. We also did budget, we actually went down in our overall salary budget, but we're budgeting an average 5% increase in staff pay. My staff hasn't had an increase in pay since 2009, so we felt that they deserve an increase in the pay. All of this is going to result in a total yearly increase of about $550 for the city of Floresville. The rest of the 36,990 will be contributed by the other taxing units.
I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Stone. Sure. I've spent some time going through this budget.
Sure.
Before I go to the specific questions, of the 9 voting members, how many must approve this budget?
A simple majority, so it would be 5 out of 9.
Have any other of the voting members taken any action on this budget?
No, sir, it was just approved by my board last night, so y'all are the first.
Okay. As I listen to your comments and look at this budget, several things don't quite make a lot of sense. You show a total decrease in salaries of $1,090. But as I go through the individuals, you have pay increases for as little as 3% for a clerical assistant to as much as 14% for an appraiser. We look at the total of raises across both operational or appraisal and collection, or operational and collection. We're looking at, if my numbers are correct, a little over, catch the right page, a little over $30,000 in salary increases. If we're increasing salaries by $30,000, how are we getting a net decrease in salary expense?
First of all, to address your first question, the $1,000 increase for the clerical assistants, she was a new hire this year. So basically, there's a period there where we want to see how that individual does. As far as for the other appraisers, when they were hired, they were started at a very low salary, and they are out of line, basically with their experience level, their education level with the other staff. So in order to be competitive with them and for my other staff, I needed to give an increase, and I needed to give them a little bit more to get them in line with the rest of the staff. As far as the increase in pay raises, in it not affecting the overall salary, basically, there's a few things. One, we had a staff member that left us last year, and we are not replacing them, so we budgeted for them for the 2013 budget, but was not replacing that staff member. We're going down there. Also, there's a difference between my salary and what the previous chief appraiser was making. I'm making less. In my replacement, I was the assistant chief is making less than what I was making. So that's why you're seeing a decrease in the salary, even though the individual salaries are increasing.
Then you have 2 employees that are split 75-25 between collection and operation?
Yes. And as always with our budget, historically we have gone under budget. Anything that we go under budget, it gets returned to the entities in direct proportion to what was contributed by that entity.
That was going to be my next question, because according to the benefits, it was a plus or minus 16% increase that y'all have budgeted out for this coming year. Okay, and that was my next question, if it falls, let's say a 10% increase, or even a 5%, whatever it may be. How are y'all planning on allocating the funds or that percentage, throughout y'all's remainder budget, but if y'all are going to be returning it back to the entities?
Yes, sir. No, we can't make a profit, so anything that we go under gets returned.
You said you're projected to be under budget this year?
We try to be under budget every year. Yes, sir.
What's the projection to be under budget this year?
We haven't had our audit. I'm speaking historically. historically, we're considerably under budget.
Considerably 5%, 10%,
Um,
2%?
I believe, last year, when we got the auditor, actually it was for the 2012 year, it was in the range of $100,000.
Which is about 10%, you're running about a $1.1 million total budget.
Yes, sir, a little bit less than.
I appreciate your candor, Mr. Stahl. The change in salary makes good sense that you've explained it, and how you've been able to do that in taking a reduced salary as the chief appraiser, and keeping the assistant chief appraiser's salary low, and still being able to give, my calculation shows an average of 6%, but the majority of the people are getting 5% raises, and I understand your differences between the 14% and the 3%. I do not see a whole lot of change in your budget in the way of operating expenses. Everything looks uniform across the board, and respect your decision to appropriately budget for Obamacare. I know this city has historically not approved your budget, but I did spend some time going through this, and your answers make a great deal of sense to me, and I appreciate that. And the fact that the President District cannot make a profit, does not have any huge capital projects planned that would impact the city of Floresville. Pending any other questions, I'm going to make a motion to approve your budget.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilman Miller to approve. Second by Councilman Rodriguez. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you for your
Mr.
time.
Stahl.
Mr. Stahl.
Now we're going to go on to 4D, consideration and action to approve an interlocal agreement for accounting services between the City of Floresville and Floresville Economic Development Corporation. Mr. Kelly?
Good evening, council. And I wish Brian would have left. I wanted to compliment him on the job he's been doing in terms of the appraisal district. It's the attitude over there has changed tremendously from a few years back, so that's been great to see. I'm coming to you this evening to present an interlocal agreement for accounting services for the FEDC. As you know, I'm the treasurer of that entity, and this is a interlocal agreement that's been approved by our board. The reason we're considering this is several reasons. Municipal type accounting is a little bit different sometimes, and Laura has been a great asset to assisting us in areas where we need to adjust things or learn where those things should be booked and recorded, etc. But at the same time, we're all about transparency, and it would give you the opportunity to see reports that you're familiar with. When we do our budget, the budget will be set up in the same reporting format that you see when you do the city's budget. Now, I hope that all of you received this in your packet. It should have been in your packets. And I'm just going to go through the list just a little bit. I'm not going to read the full paragraph, but we'll just point out the highlights. The FEDC, of course, will be responsible for approving their budget, completing the budget, and bringing it before the city council. And of course, it would be arranged in the same reporting format that you see with the city budgets. The FEDC would also request checks to be issued. All signature authority would remain with the FEDC, and we would still have the 2 signatures that we require now on any checks written. All checks that are requested would be accompanied with a proper invoice and would not be paid, of course, unless there was a proper invoice attached. Laura or whoever would be appointed by the city to do this would actually reconcile each of our bank accounts monthly. We would provide those statements to them on a regular basis. You'll turn the page here. Of course, the city comptroller shall be available in person by phone, email, to assist with questions or issues pertaining to the county of the FEDC, to the extent that such does not substantially interfere with the city comptroller's primary duties to the city. And we came up with a dollar amount of $350 a month that we would pay for those services. That was calculated based on the number of hours that we think the city staff would spend in helping us with that process. Currently, we keep our own books on QuickBooks, but some of the county features in the QuickBooks program doesn't work well with some of the municipal type reporting. So we would get away from that. We currently have spent a lot of time preparing the financials to where now they're very detailed and we understand where all the costs are, revenue sources, etc. And so we have a nice clean slate that we can provide to Laura when she goes to set this up in your accounting software. We can just simply load those line items when we do our budget and move that information over. I know it shows the July 1st effective date. There's a question there by Laura. I know she's not in the room right now as to when Andy Eubanks and myself met with her, we talked about an October 1 date. We could just simply put a July 1 date. If you felt it would be better that we move to a later date, or if that's a discussion you want to have here tonight, we can do that. But our hope would be that when we plan our budget, that by the new fiscal year, we would have these items in your system and reporting would start at that point. Did y'all discuss any more, Andy, about this or anything?
Yes, we did, Jason. She left me some notes prior to leaving, and just addressing what you just spoke to the council. In her notes, she said, we'll begin setting up funds now, if approved by the council, but begin the process of financials in AP October 1, 2013. Also, just for the council's information, the FEDC's budget process would be include their budget in our software. So when you get your financials, after the board approves it, it's all inclusive in what you get from Laura. I know she spent some time with Jason and Mr. Eubanks and discussed this. She's in her process of formatting the accounting system within City Hall to meet the needs and the requirements of the council. This is something she's been wanting to do for some time. So she was more than happy to visit with Jason and Mr. Eubanks in regards to this, because we're sure this streamline it so the council can see what's going on, and be more transparent like everything else. And it sure does help them on the process of the government.
It would also streamline the audit process as well, because then we're not having to provide all the documents that might delay you in your audit process. We would have that information right there back over time.
And the city is okay with the July 1st effective date?
I think that would serve the purpose of them getting everything set up for the full-blown accounting process for the October 1. So yeah, we can do that now. We're going to allow her some time to work with easy.
And also I'll add this, that we did type this agreement up, if the copies another agreement with the larger city in our area, and read by Laura and Andy as well. And then once we were good with an agreement, and we had your legal counsel review it, they added some things, but this is the final agreement that they proposed.
We don't need any special wording in here for audit issues, do we, Lou? I know historically we had some challenges getting information that way. I know Jason spoke that it would streamline the audit process just so that we cover ourselves that this is available, that we don't have the hiccups that we had a couple of years ago.
No, sir. The main thing we wanted to do was and I think it clearly puts the city council in charge, and that was our main contribution to the revision.
Jason, will your invoices have approval signatures?
Well, our invoices, right now, the the items that we pay are items that have been approved by the board to pay. So as long as the proper person presents that for payment, then that means it's been cleared through our account. We could come up with a form, which is my recommendation, that we provide a form that we would probably sign off on that form with instructions. Then that way there's no discrepancy about should this be paid in a certain way or whatever. So that's what happens. Most check requests are made with a check request form. And
But ultimately, aren't you gonna have, even if a check request went through, nobody from the city could sign it, that check unsigned is coming back to the EDC and the appropriate signatures would have to sign it, so that would be the check and balance.
Right.
And, I don't know how many hours were calculated into the $350, but does Laura have the time to do this?
Yes. Yes, with her skill set, she has adequate time to perform.
Thank you.
May I just add something on that point? We have cleaned a lot of the books up in terms of making sure everything's reporting in the proper jobs that we have going on now. And so we have a real understanding of what those projects are running, what they cost, and where the money's going. So once we get this set up, and it's going to be set up right from day one, she'll know where to record the future entries, and then it's just going to be caught up. We won't have to worry about it. At the end of the year, when we print the documents, it's ready. So I think that part of it's in good shape now.
Excellent.
You're doing a good job, you're all working together.
Thank you.
I'm here for that hours in there.
We have.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Good job. Mrs. Mayor, I'll offer a motion. That we approve this, the interlocal agreement for accounting services between the city of Floresville and the Floresville Economic Development Corporation.
Okay, I have a motion, may I have a second?
That's it.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilman Castillo, second by Councilman Manuel. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay, next we're going to go on to item 4E, consideration and action to approve final plat on Budani subdivision.
Mayor, to give you a little history on it, in our last council meeting was tabled due to the lack of the contours depicted on the plat, the contours of topo. And in the June 5th P&Z meeting, it was approved with the condition that those topos, the contours be in the plat. So Ms. Pollock sent y'all an email on June 26th showing you the plat with the contours on the topo there from Pollock Survey.
Does everybody have their copies? Yes.
No, they don't have a hard copy of those. No, no, I don't think we would have a hard copy of it.
Do y'all need to see the plat? I actually have a Mylar here as well.
The question I'd have, this got tabled because we were pending this particular mapping. Does this meet all the requirements of P&Z? So there's nothing pending there?
Yes, because in the June 5th meeting, the PNC approved it with the condition that the contours be on the plat. Yes.
That and the variance for that corner lot, correct?
It was not indicated in the June 5th PNC meeting for the variance on that one lot that doesn't meet the requirements.
Can you restate that regarding, the variance wasn't approved by P&Z?
When they approved it in the June 5th meeting, It was approved with the condition that they put the contours and the topo on the map. Did not indicate on the one lot with the shortage of the lot.
Counselor, shouldn't we, I think we're opening a can of worms here, you know?
And again, Mr. Miller, I just want to let you know that this plat was done the best way possible to get the lots in requirement for his acreage.
And I don't deny that, Ms. Nichols. What I'm concerned about is ensuring that as we approve things with variances, because obviously this is a variance, okay? I'm not.
The variance on the topos and the contours, yes, sir.
Well, or on the lot size.
On the lot size.
On the lot size. That we do it in such a way that we're bulletproof on that. And Lou, you and I had a discussion about just that process this evening. Are we okay on this plat and not setting a poor precedent in that P and Z didn't approve it with a lot size variance?
They didn't ask for a variance, as I understand it, Mr. Miller, and so where they're gonna be stuck is when they come in for a house, for a permit for that, they're gonna have to address the variance in that context, or for whatever structure they approve, or request an approval on.
And again, they will have to come through the application process through P and Z and even to city council.
Okay.
So they're not out of the woods to put it.
So the
I
variance
would
is,
disagree with that, because, I mean, if you're gonna approve a plat, you're gonna approve a plat as is, so you basically can build anything that you would want without having to come back to P and Z, without having to come back to council, and so forth. You know, I mean, that's what my understanding is. But what's on the property right now, on that lot, that corner lot? Nothing?
There's nothing in that, those.
And he has, I mean, obviously, he has intentions of putting something on the lot.
He wishes to bring a home to the one lot there in the property.
and if he did that, he would come back through your office for a permit, and
In lot number 3, yes.
And your office at that point would recognize that the lot does not meet requirements
Yes.
and therefore would require a variance, then it would come back to planning and zoning and back to this council.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Okay. With that in place, I'm okay with this plat.
Is that,
That is the process.
That's exactly my understanding. I spent time with Ms. Nichols this evening so that I could answer that question, she could answer the question, and that is the process.
So on every single lot, on every single subdivision that is approved, they have to come back before they start.
If they don't meet the record, back for issuance of the permit.
I think we're,
There's
I think
one lot there that I think almost inherently you're looking at.
yeah, of course, I mean, that's that corner lot, that lot 3. You know, I'm just saying, you're saying, giving them the false apparition that that this lot 3 is okay. You know, especially whenever he comes back to get a house put on it and say, oh no, you can't because it doesn't meet the requirements.
Well, Councilman Rodriguez, unfortunately, we don't have land that is perfect for the 75-foot frontage and the 100-foot depth. That's why we have this process.
I understand, but, I mean, and he absolutely
This is
needs.
the best way possible he was able to divide this lot, divide this acreage.
I guess his concern is when that client comes back in, is he aware that he probably will not get the permits for that corner lot?
Yes, ma'am.
He is aware,
Yes,
and
yes.
he's not here tonight, right?
He is here. He's sitting right there in the back, Mr. Duran.
Mr. Duran, if you want to comment
Yes,
on that?
señor Durán, usted sabe lo que en el, usted habla inglés, ¿verdad? I mean, o español. Okay. Pues entonces, usted sabe lo que en el lot 3, que cuando usted quiere venir o poner una casa o algo, que hay chance que no puedes poner una casa en ese lot, ¿verdad?
Está hablando
Yes, sir, yes.
Lo que le están diciendo aquí es que sí le van a dar permiso a tener todo, aprovechos que no hacen esto, ¿no? Porque no tiene los measurements.
Tex-Mex to him. He talks speak Spanish. He told me Tex-Mex to him.
Esa es la cosa, si no le pueden dar el permiso.
Hey, just because you dressed up in Malachi suit doesn't mean that he's
What?
Just because you dressed up in Malachi suit doesn't mean
He said he can't understand Spanish, that you're gonna understand him, Holy Ghost? Okay, well, I'm not kidding. He's gonna speak.
You must talk outside, please.
Todo lo que le pueden dar hoy es permiso para él. So, es cosa de usted, diga. Entonces, es la cosa si no le puede dar permiso.
Without a waiver, without a waiver.
What's that?
I mean, he would have to come back to planning and zoning and get an exception to policy on it, or a waiver.
Eso tiene que ir para acá. Mira, ya se me olvidó esto. Esta es la ciudad, no tiene, la ciudad necesita. Y si ellos dicen sí, no pueden ponerlo, pero hasta que le den el permiso, no va a poder. Es cosa de usted si no quiere que le dan el permiso para todo lo demás y para atrás de aquí se va a tener que
Well, yeah, I understand.
permiso para todos, para este.
And all of a sudden,
Es que una noche porque sí, así como está todo, pero tiene que venir para atrás. Porque si no, así es todo lo que puede hacer con la propiedad, usted no lo sabe, ¿verdad? Pero sin agarrar permiso, si quiere, le dan por todo lo demás. O si no, y esa es la problemática, porque usted y su familia tienen. No puede usted venir a la casa de permiso, porque no tiene la propiedad. Y eso es lo que quieren para ellos, que usted sepa que están diciendo que sí problemas, así como siempre, pero la para y que mira, yo ya tengo todo esto listo, pero esta propiedad si no, no se puede hacer nada. Sí, no, pero tiene que vivir con la si vive somos no, y hablar con nosotros.
Madam Mayor, is there any way we can find out what's going on if don't speak Spanish?
What your question is?
What's that phone call?
yeah, it's a basic reiteration of what. Yeah, and I can simplify it for you, it's a basic reiteration. Well, Mr. Duran wanted to know what we were saying too.
Well, if you want to, then I
understand that, but they're interpreting for him the rules what he is. Okay, well, I think let them get through with their conversation. To you.
We're all there, close there. If you can interpret.
Sure, and I will do that, no problem. Okay, all that we're telling, and I can talk to him and I can tell you in English, that that's what your request and that's what the council would like.
That's what he's.
I'm telling him, and I've told him that he's already come to the P and Z and he's come to the city hall, to council, and the only thing that they're approving is everything except that variance on it. The variance, he says that that's a property that he owns. His family owns everything else, so he wants to know the process. Do I have to come back? We can approve, I'm telling them they can approve everything. Other than that, you need to request a variance for that. And you're gonna have to come back to the P and Z to get approval for that, and to the council to get approval for that. If not, they won't approve any of it, and then it's a dead issue until he gets everything resolved. To bring back to the P and Z to get the whole plat approved with the variance like the councilman is requesting.
Unless you can find a better way to subdivide the.
Unless you can come, yes. Okay, that's it. It's okay, get us in. I'm asking him what he wants to do. Bueno, pues no le van a dar permiso, va a tener que venir para atrás al P&Z plan. He's not gonna receive permission tonight because he, or the recommendation from staff is that he doesn't receive, the approval tonight because his concern is that property. And I'm telling him that his family, will not be able to subdivide that till he gets that resolved if that's what he wants. Because he's here to speak for that piece of property, and, that's all that he's concerned is. So I think they're giving The problem is that he's stating that that front portion that needs a variance is the one with the services. He owns this piece at the front, which needs a variance, and he owns the back, but in the back there is no service.
And Andy, I think, if I understand it correctly, I think maybe the best way to do this is to readjust it with planning and zoning to include the variance and bring it back to council. I mean, obviously, that, if that's the way it has to be divided because of services and that sort of thing, and that's what the understanding I'm getting from Ms. Nichols, that's the appropriate action of council. We just cannot do that here because that wasn't the action of the P&Z. So therefore, I'm going to make the motion to table this until it can be represented back to us by P&Z with the variance.
I have a motion to table item 4E by Councilman Miller, second by Councilman Waters. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Now we're going to go on to item 4F. Consideration and action to approve the preliminary plat for the Richardson subdivision. Ms. Nichols?
Mayor? Well, I'm gonna try to simplify this as much as possible. What the P&Z approved last night was the preliminary plat that Richardson's has submitted. Y'all have received your comments from Mr. Heimer on what the Richardsons did was they came back with showing our standards and not the county's. They're submitting it for everything that the city of Floresville is requesting, what is required. Okay. P&Z did approve it with the variance of the current. Now, if you want to shoot me questions, we can start.
P&Z approved it with the variance of the curb.
Yes, sir. They made a motion last night that they approved the variance recommended by the city engineer. Variance including not requiring curbs on the Priceway Drive or road and accepting the double surface treatment for county standards for the pavement.
Okay, can you elaborate that second comment, county standards for the pavement? What is it? Is it going to be asphalt or is it going to be chip seal?
Well, they added that in there because that was what Mr. Hyman had recommended with the county standards. What our standards is to add, not to stop there, is to also include asphalt on top of that as well, which is our standards. Which he has agreed to. Yes.
But that's not what P&Z approved, and that's not what we're approving here. You're saying that we're giving two variances on no curbs and on the asphalt, even though he's agreed to do that.
Yes.
No, that's not correct.
Well, if you look at your notes, Mr. Heimer has gone by what the county specs are, and he's gone by the recommendation on the usage of their materials, if accepted by county. And again, me and Lou were talking earlier that We do have an agreement with the city, with the county on subdivisions in our ETJ, which specifically says that the city specifically agrees that because it desires to have the authority to regulate subdivisions within the ETJ of the city, the authority to do so is adequate consideration for the performance of the obligation under this agreement. Basically, what we're doing here is they're presenting a plat with the city standards, which Mr. Heimer has made comments and has recommended. He's added in there what the county does use, which we typically do as well, except we add asphalt with it because it is our city standards. And he did recommend no curbs. That doesn't mean that they may not want to do curbs, or the city does not want to do curbs. But he did recommend, upon his recommendation, that curbing may not be, to not have the curbs. I recommend accepting the
Because of maintenance concerns, and it's
Exactly.
item 4.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question, Lou. Even though P and Z made said approval, as she's presented it, can we as a council make the motion to approve the plat without those variances and specify that it will have the asphalt, or that it will be city standards, curbs, asphalt, et cetera?
I think you can make that as a condition to your approval, yes.
Where does, do you know specifically where it says in the compliance that it has to be asphalt?
We do not have it written down as what the specifications that it has to be asphalt. We don't have it written down as such. It is on our recommendation that they do have asphalt because it is it's better quality and it lasts longer, and we don't want to have streets without the asphalt.
You started to raise your hand and speak on the issue of the asphalt.
This is Daryl Cordella, he's the engineer for the Price Chevrolet.
Good evening, council. My name is Gerald Gallet. At last night's P and Z, the discussion was the variance on the curb. The discussion about pavement came up because there isn't, even as cited by the city engineer, there's not a recognized pavement section. Okay, there's not a typical section. We've heard from city staff that there's an understanding of asphalt with 6 inches of base. The section that is being proposed for Price Way is 10 inches of base, which satisfies the county's 10 inches of base, with 2 inches of asphalt, which satisfies the council's or the city staff's understanding of an asphalt pavement recognized in the city of Floresville. So the pavement section on Price Way is going to be 2 inches of asphalt or 10 inches of base.
Next question. I was told about, as I looked at the plat that was emailed to me, there's an extension beyond the cul-de-sac. That was identified as a future planning or a future extension. That is not part of this platting, or it is part of this platting?
It's not of this plat, but that is for future planning.
So we would be approving the plat to the end of the cul-de-sac.
Which has been enlarged to city standards.
As stated a number of times, my biggest concern is not stopping Richardson building a Chevrolet place. I want this to go on. My concern is that we apply the rules uniformly, and if we have justification for a waiver or an exception, that we do that. This is clearly a piece of property that will be in the city limits within the next few years, easily the next 3 to 5 years. Although we have no annexation plan per se. But in the very near future, is there a justification for not requiring the curbs?
Justification would be, if you're asking is it needed from an engineering perspective, it is not supplying any drainage. There's bar ditches on the side of the road to handle the drainage. It's a 450-foot long street that'll shed water to the side into a bar ditch. From an engineering perspective, that would be the only
Are curbs a showstopper on the construction of that facility?
You say about 450 feet?
Times 2 and the big bubble.
That's two and going about,
About
approximately 625 a foot.
What was the number?
Say approximately what, 625 a foot, $7, that's
I sold $12 for
12.
curb. So that, another $12,000 on top of, another
$450.
$30,000 to build it to the city's standard, even though it's in the county.
And it is in writing, that it states it's a rule for the city, did I understand?
We don't have actual specifications of the road construction.
Madam Mayor, if I can add in, what Mr. Heimer has done, we did this on water and sewer standards a couple of years ago. We adopted the city of San Antonio standards by reference for water and sewer construction. Mr. Heimer has used city of San Antonio standards for road construction as part of his memorandum in this review process, but it has not been adopted by the city as an ordinance.
So as in our ordinance, it's not specified curbing.
No, we have curbing.
Curbing,
Yes.
it's the asphalt.
Yeah.
It's road construction.
Now, let me mention one other thing so that process-wise, we know what we're doing here. And that is the plat that you have in smaller version in front of you. It needs to be, several things need to be considered that are going to happen. It's going to have Oak Hill's water signature on it, and that should not be a problem. It's going to have Phelps' signature on it. That shouldn't be a problem. It does provide at the bottom, at paragraph 19, that this will be maintained by the city of Floresville, and that's part of the agreement that we have with the county, that when we take on responsibilities for approval, that there'll be city maintenance and city standards. The other thing that we do need to address, and it would be a condition that you approve it with tonight, is a letter from TxDOT with reference to turn lanes, whatever TxDOT may require. So that needs to be understood to be part of the motion. And then the last thing is the 2-year bond maintenance requirement is part of our standards. Then once